I'm glad you're here. Go ahead and open Psalm 81. That's where we're going to be in a moment here. Throughout most of this calendar year, 2022, I don't know, it was pretty early on in January, started to put out a few things there for us to be remembering. And this will be pop quiz time, and this will probably show how much I've failed at this. But so if I say the end is coming, what's the second part of that? The end is coming. Be ready. Right? The end is coming. We know that. God's already given us the whole story here, and the end is coming. His desire for our hearts and for the heart of the world is that we're ready for that. This physical world isn't going to last forever, and our bodies aren't going to last forever. So the second thing is time is short. Don't wait, and don't give up. Time is short, don't give up, right? That can be our attitude when it looks like, hey, I'm not going to be around very long, my lifespan in comparison to the history of the world. And if you say the end's coming anyway, we can shrink back and say, well, then why put any effort into it and kind of give up or check out? And as Christians, we spiritualize it. We say, well, this world isn't my home anyway, and I just like to get to glory, get to heaven with God. And that's going to be for eternity. But don't give up, don't check out right now, because there's work to be done, right? God is still doing work, and there's work to be done. And then the fourth piece is he has given us gifts and abilities, so we need to steward them well. God's not done with the earth. God's not done with your life. He's not done with my life. He's not done using Christ Life Church in our community and in our homes. He is not done expanding his kingdom on earth. He's still working, and he wants us to be a part of it. And he has gifted us with certain abilities and a time and place in this world, and so we should steward those well. Maybe you're prone to looking at the enormity of the task and going, well, how could we do it all? And thankfully, he doesn't ask us to do it all. He asks us just to steward one little piece that he's entrusted to you and to me, and together corporately we get to do that. So I just want to remind you of those. That has nothing to do really with the message this morning. That's the overall arching picture, just kind of things that are driving us here at Christ Life. We are in our summer of Psalms. We've been walking through, just kind of picking some of the Psalms. We're doing it fairly chronologically, or in order that they come in the Psalter. And today we're going to focus, we're still in Book 3. Book 3 of the Psalms is known as the national hymns. I was thinking of doing something with you. I'm not going to do it, but we have a number of kind of patriotic songs. A couple of years ago, before COVID, and we couldn't gather together as groups, our kids' school, one November for Veterans Day, all the different age ranges had practiced a bunch of different songs, and they invited the parents to come and be a part of this kind of Veterans Day celebration. We weren't really sure what we were in for, so we all gathered in their auditorium area, and they sang all of these songs. And you could probably think of them besides our own national anthem, other ones, God Bless America and America the Beautiful. And then they went into the different branches of the military, and they had representatives from each one of those branches there. And it broke every adult in the room. We couldn't handle it. It was wonderful to see and hear. And there's certain things nationally that we kind of connect to. So did Israel. There were songs and psalms that helped remind them of what God had done, who he was, things that they celebrated, and exhortation, things that they needed to be reminded of, that God knew, hey, it would be easy for them to forget or to stray from his key purposes. So Psalm 81 falls in that category of a national song or a national hymn for his people. Here's the exercise I want you to do. You can write it down if you want to, but just kind of a mental exercise. First, If I ask you to think of an idol, what comes to your mind? No, so an idol. I-D-O-L. Yeah, maybe kinds of different things. Probably in our day and age, in our specific American culture, we probably don't think of an object, like an image of something. But there's still plenty of cultures around the world that's what their mind would be drawn to, is some statue, some figure, some human creation that represented for them a deity or a whole group of deities that they would worship. So bring it in a little more cultural for us. We'll go broad as Americans, as Westerners. Now go through the exercise. What are some idols we would have in our day and age? And I'll even let you say those out loud. Like, oh, wait a minute, how does that work? What are some idols we have as a culture have? Well, you have one? Oh, okay. Okay. Sports. Yeah. Electronics. Clothing. What else? Celebrities. We like the world, what the world offers, yeah? Yeah, there's some big categories there. I surely don't have them all listed down, but so some things fell into like material possessions, materialism, isn't it? I mean, isn't that what the whole free market is based on? Is I have something and I want to convince you that you need it, you want it, and you would be better if you had it, right? And so how many ad dollars are spent convincing you need some, and we've bought into those, right? We got a lot of stuff sitting around. So possessions, materialism, more things. I think things like sports and even electronics falls into entertainment. We elevate entertainment, and probably for each one of us that looks a little different. But we work just so that then we can go have fun, whatever the fun is for you. And we kind of elevate fun, entertainment, pleasure, just whatever makes us feel good. You live in a free society, Steve, so that you can just have pleasure. You can just enjoy whatever it is you want to enjoy, and nobody should be able to tell you otherwise, right? That's a pretty big idol. All right, let's bring the circle in a little closer. What about as Christians? What are some idols that creep in to the Christian world? Well, listen, you're squirming a little bit now. Symbolism, the cross, okay? Anything else? Family. I agree, Jake. Something I got to go off on that. It's because I'm the one up here with the mic, so I get to have my soapboxes. Exactly. And you're going to end up listing a bunch of good things that God created and God intended for us to steward well, but they aren't supposed to be the main thing. Family, man, families falling apart all around the world. The enemy is just attacking and destroying our idea of gender and marriage and family and what it means. And so as Christians, man, we want to guard that, right? That's good. That's God's heart. And we want to pour into our families. But sometimes don't they almost become an idol? They become our identity. Enough of that. Yeah, someone else? Tradition. This is how we've done it. This is how I still want to do it. And I think tradition, one of our songs said, people who've been failed by religion, and it can't go into that just religiosity. We go through the rituals, we go through the steps, we check off the boxes, and we feel like we've done a good job. Our report card looks pretty good. Yeah. sure. Yeah. I think I don't want to use a word too negatively because it has a lot of positive, but in our history, the word piety or being pious has sometimes meant an attitude of to be holier than someone else, which ends up being not holier than anyone else. But yes, that if I look the holiest, the cleanest, the purest, I'm doing good. And isn't that the Pharisaical attitude of, oh God, thank you that I'm not that person, that my life's pretty cleaned up. We have idols. Maybe we don't think we do, but they're around us. Our society bows to them all the time, and I think they creep in to the church. One of the very eye-opening things it was for me in my years in Brazil, and I know even now, and you guys are very aware, our family has been connected to Brazil in past ministry, and my folks were there as well. When we say Brazil, you can instantly get a very remote idea. You instantly go to the idea of the Amazon and jungles and the Amazon River. We were in southern Brazil. It was very urban. Our small town we lived in had over 200,000 people that lived in it. It was the industrial center of really the whole continent, but especially the enormous country of Brazil. We were not remote. We did not have to go without. We had many things at our disposal. It was very modern, very urban. And yet, driving around in our urban city, and especially right outside of the city where a lot of the factories were, once in a while along the street, you would see some sort of a bowl or a basket on the ground, sometimes right on the sidewalk. There would be candles around it. There would be things in the bowl. I never really went over to examine them, but they were modern-day offerings and sacrifices in the occult religion of Macumba to have spells on people. They were like little idols that had been placed out there to have an effect on that area or on a person, and we would, on a semi-regular basis, see those around a bustling city doing everything very normal and modern by our perspectives, and yet still believing in that spiritual power there, very dark. And it had an effect on people. It did. For me, I haven't been a lot of places, but that was a very physical representation that people's hearts and mind are steered to things that are much less than what God has for them. Well, thinking about that, let's read Psalm 81. To the choir master, according to the Gittith of Asaph. Sing aloud to God our strength. Shout for joy to the God of Jacob. Raise a song. Sound the tambourine, the sweet lyre with the harp. Blow the trumpet at the new moon, at the full moon, on our feast day. For it is a statute for Israel, a rule of the God of Jacob. He has made it a decree in Joseph when he went out over the land of Egypt. I hear a language I had not known. I relieved your shoulder of the burden. Your hands were freed from the basket. In distress, you called and I delivered you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I tested you in the waters of Meribah. Hear, O my people, while I admonish you. O Israel, if you would but listen to me, there shall be no strange God among you. You shall not bow down to a foreign God. I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide and I will fill it. But my people did not listen to my voice. Israel would not submit to me. So I gave them over to their stubborn hearts to follow their own counsels. Oh, that my people would listen to me, that Israel would walk in my ways. I would soon subdue their enemies and turn my hand against their foes. Those who hate the Lord would cringe toward me, and their fate would last forever. But he would feed you with the finest of the wheat, and with honey from the rock, I would satisfy you. We have said that as we go through the Psalms, so many of the Psalms are real people living real lives with real problems and struggles, but through song and prayer, crying out in real faith to a real God. Several weeks ago, we pointed out that some of the Psalms are kind of the response of God. They're God crying out as well, too. They're his message and his cry, his heart for his people. It's going both ways. It's very intimate. It's very personal. Hopefully, it makes it very connectable for you and I. And at times, I think the wording of the Psalms will line up with your heart and where you're at. This again is a corporate worship song. There's some clues that it was probably sung at some specific times. In those first verses there, verse 3, blow the trumpet at the new moon, at the full moon, on our feast day. We know Numbers, in the book of Numbers in the Old Testament, there was a command. It says, on the day of your gladness, and at your appointed feasts, and at the beginning of your months, you shall blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings. They shall be a reminder of you before your God. I am the Lord your God. We just want to walk through this psalm here. There's chunks again. It's really nice. A lot of psalms are broken up into sections, and those sections really kind of have a purpose, and they kind of show us the flow. So in verses 1 through 3, we have the introduction, we have a fanfare. It's like all of the instruments all at one time and all of the voices. This song happens triumphantly. It's like the music of a king coming in. Sing to the Lord with our strength. Shout to joy to the Lord. Raise a song. Sound the tambourine, sweet lyre, and the harp. Blow the trumpet at the new moon. A picture, and my parents are with us today, and they'll smile at this. Growing up in the Portland area in Oregon, there was a pizza place known as the Organ Grinder. That was O-R-G-A-N, play on words though, because it was in Oregon, so that made us happy. And that is because in this old pizza parlor was a large, full pipe organ. And one whole wall had all of the wood pipes and brass pipes and little instruments and little piccolos and things. And there were times when they had an organist who sat there and played the organ. Sometimes there was even a screen that had black and white movies playing, like the Charlie Chaplin type, and they would narrate, they would play, accompany the movie. And some of it was soft, and sometimes just a few of the sounds are going off. But once in a while, and there's a phrase in organ playing, you pull out all the stops. You open everything up, and all the sound would come out, and all of the instruments would make noise. I think there was a monkey that danced around in a circle. And it got your attention. It's loud. It's good. Here's this call to worship. People, you know what time it is. For us, our first Sunday of the month, what do we do around at Christ Life the first Sunday of the month? Thank you. See, you got it. For them, the first Sunday of the month, or the first Sabbath, Saturday of the month, their new moon, they were supposed to sound the trumpets and sing a song and declare something. That's what he moves into in these next verses. Verse 4 through 7. It's a statute to Israel. It's a rule of the God of Jacob. He has made it a decree. What is he referring to? What I just read to you out of Numbers 10. That they were supposed to have a corporate time of remembering, and Numbers reduces it down to one word, that I am the Lord your God. But that standalone phrase, as straightforward and as simple, was wrapped up in so much history. And many of the Psalms gives us imagery of what that history was. And so there's a really, really quick history lesson in verses 5 through 7. of what God did. Some of it we've sang about today, some of it we mentioned last Sunday. He says, he went out over the land of Egypt. I hear a language I had not known. And then it goes into quotes here of God speaking. I relieved your shoulder of the burden. Your hands were freed from the basket. In distress you called, and I delivered you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I tested you at the waters of Meribah. We don't need a whole history lesson here, but let me make the connections for us, because it could be a disconnect as we read that and go, I'm not sure what he's talking about. God, after a long time of silence, comes to Moses and says, I hear my people in Egypt. They're in captivity. They have been there. They have increased in size. And now I hear them, and I'm going to go, and I'm going to make them my own, and I'm going to take them to a promised land. And Moses, you're the guy who's going to help lead them into it. So he comes down, and we know through the plagues, through God's mighty demonstration, ultimately, it jumps there in verse 6, of relieving them from their burden. They had fallen into a place in society in Egypt where they were the slaves. They were the hard laborers who were making the bricks to build the cities, to build the monuments. They had to carry the straw, make the mud. It was hard work. It was killing them. It was destroying them. He says, and I relieved you of that. That slavery that you were captive to, I got you out of it. Your hands were freed from the baskets. In distress you called, and I delivered you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. This is a picture now, so they've just come out, and after a few weeks, God leads them to the base of Mount Sinai. And he has to instruct them on how to be his people. He needs to reveal his heart to them. And he needs to give them the rules and the commandments and train them how to be a society, especially so they can go into the land that he has prepared for them. And he tells Moses, he said, the people need to consecrate themselves for 3 days. You need to be ready because I'm coming down and you won't be able to handle it. And people don't come up against the mountain. There's going to be a line. Please don't cross the line. This is sacred. This is holy. And Moses, I'm going to speak to you and to the people. And then it says that's what happened. That on that third day, there was thunder and lightning. Maybe you got some yesterday. We had some that came over our house. And we got some good rain. And I'm happy because we got good rain, right? There was thunder and lightning, and they heard God so much to the point where they said, Moses, tell God just to speak to you. We can't handle it when he speaks to us. You just receive his message, and you bring it down and talk to us. But there was thunder and smoke and lightning on Mount Sinai. God gives them his word, his heart, some commandments. We're going to get into those here in a moment. And then he moves on in the story here. The psalmist does. He's jumping right along because they all know the story. They just got to be reminded it. He says, and I tested you at the waters of Meribah. And this was a picture of his provision. That they were now in the wilderness and it was dry and there wasn't much sustenance for them. And at times they were worried about this. And Moses, what have you done to us? It would have been better if we were back in Egypt. And God takes care of them and provides water for them. Why would the psalmist put this in his song? This monthly remembrance. This is an amazing picture of God's heart of compassion. He didn't tell the Israelites, man, you're in a mess. I don't know if I want to be your God when you're so messed up. When you can get out of Egypt and clean yourself up and make yourself a good, proper people, then call me and I'll be your king. It's not how he did it. He said, I hear your cry. I see your mess. Let me get you out of that. Then let me train you up to be the people I want you to be. Let me guide you in right worship and right living, and so that you see my whole intent in my heart that I'm all in, I'm going to provide for you along the way. When you think you don't have enough, I'm going to be there to sustain you. So it's a beautiful unpacking of them continuing now in their history to do what God has asked them to and to remind them of who he is and what his heart is. Then he gets to the one thing. I think verses 8 through 10 are kind of the pinnacle. This is where the psalmist has been directed. He said, "Hear, O my people, while I admonish you." I'm going to speak some hard things, some important things, so listen up. "O Israel, if you would but listen to me, there shall be no strange god among you. You shall not bow down to a foreign god. I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it." There was one thing. You and I, man, have you tried to read through the Old Testament? Have you gotten into like Leviticus and the giving of the law? Read through Numbers or Deuteronomy, which is a whole retelling of the law? And we can go through it, and it's kind of like walking through mud. And it's good. It's inspired. Don't hear me wrong, but it's difficult, right? What does this mean? And I remember even being raised in a pastor's home, finally in Bible college, sitting through an Old Testament survey class to kind of help the single picture rise to the surface. And probably the best way to say it was God wanted the world, his people, to know one thing, that he was God, he alone. The whole earth belonged to him. All people within it were created by him and made to serve and worship him alone. And the whole Old Testament is a circular motion of people listening to that, being raised up in him, then their hearts turning to other things, being disciplined, God redeeming them, bringing them back in that cycle that our hearts are bent to as people. Where did he get this? Two things I want us to draw from. Exodus 20. If you want to flip over to Exodus 20, you can. What are they being reminded of? At Mount Sinai, God is displaying his heart, showing his character, renewing his covenant with them, making the main thing the main thing. We come to Exodus chapter 20, and that's, hopefully you have a title there that says the 10 Commandments. Let me read the first 7 verses. God spoke all these words, saying, "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the 3rd and the 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain." If you go back to your Sunday school days, and our kids downstairs could tell you this, what we just walked through is the first 3 commandments of the 10 Commandments. If you've studied the 10 Commandments, you know that the first 4 are very vertically focused. Their relationship with God. The second 6, or the last 6, are very horizontally focused in their relationship to man around them and how they should live out that relationship with God. And these verse 3 really drill down on the singular aspect that God wants them to know. Because he's provided for them, he has delivered them, he is to be the sole affection of their heart. Nothing else. And he says it several different ways because we all know we have to hear it different ways, right? We don't get it the first time. We're a little dense that way. So he says, first, don't have any other gods. Okay, if you don't quite understand that, let me give you the second one and spell it out. All the people you're going to be around, all these other cultures that you're going to go in and out of their lands and their tribes, they're going to have different gods. They're going to have different images, different things that they worship. Don't have any of them. Don't try to wiggle it out. Say, well, it's something that's celestial. He goes, nope, if it's from the heavens, that's not it. If it's something from the ground, that's not it. If it's something from the water, that's not it. He's speaking very simply to them. Verse 7, the third, don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Hopefully you understand this. He's not just talking about cussing, about using his name improperly. It is if you go out under my banner, if you go forth claiming that you're part of the people of God, you better look like what it means to follow and serve God. Don't do that in vain. Don't do it empty, because everyone else around you, the rest of the world, sees you and looks at you, and you are my representative. And it will not be a guiltless situation if you go out empty, claiming to be of God. Drawing their whole hearts and minds to one thing, that he and he alone was God. Many years later, flip over to Deuteronomy chapter 6. That generation didn't quite get it. Some things rose up in their heart, mostly fear and anxiety. And when God led them to go into the promised land, they listened to the 10 spies that were fearful and doubtful, and they said, we can't do it. We can't go in. God says, okay, have your way. You're going to need to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. The next generation I will lead in. So after 40 years, Moses is now getting to the end of his physical life, and God has Moses give a whole retelling of the law, and that's what Deuteronomy is. So Deuteronomy 5 actually reiterates the 10 commandments, but I want to look at Deuteronomy 6, the beginning, because once again, God makes it really straightforward, starting in verse 1. Now this is the commandment, the statutes, the rules that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you, that you may do them in the land to which you are going over to possess it, that you may fear the Lord your God, you and your son and your son's son, by keeping all of his statutes and his commandments, which I command you all the days of your life, that your days may be long. Hear therefore, O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. That was it. When Jesus is asked, Jesus, Son of God, is asked, teacher, what's the greatest commandment? It's what he goes to. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. He condenses all the law and the prophets, all the Old Testament, down to that thing. And here, once a month, they were supposed to sing and proclaim that reality. But God's admonishment is, I'm the one who brought you up out of Egypt. Open wide your mouth and I will fill you. Don't have anything else that takes my place. Let me make a connection here. I hope this works, and it's just what God was dealing with in my heart. The children of God had been set free. In Egypt, there was a step of faith they had to take. The 10th plague was that the angel of death was going to come over their homes, and that to be saved, they had to trust that the blood of a lamb over their door would be the sign that they were trusting God for their deliverance, and that the angel of death would go over. Therefore, that next day or later that night, when they were led out of Egypt, they had expressed faith in God. And they were made free. They were no longer under the control and rule and reign of Egypt and Pharaoh. But now they had to learn to live out that faith. I think that's a direct picture of what Christ has done for us. And if you're a Christian, if you claim to be a Christ follower, we know the gospel says that is as simple as believing that Jesus died for us, that he shed his blood for us, and that in him we can be made free. That is the promise of the gospel, and I believe that to be true. But then there's more. They had a lot of Egypt left in them, and they were still going to live in a world that was going to try to influence them every day. And they had to come to a crisis of faith and relationship that truly believed that God wasn't just enough to get them out of their trouble and out of Egypt, but also to be everything they needed for every day for the rest of their life. And that was a battle. It was a battle individually for them. It was a battle corporately and nationally for them. And they found themselves wandering in a wilderness with a gracious God who put up with all of their antics and their attitudes, still loving them and still providing for them, even though they didn't deserve it. On one hand, they had been set free, and yet inside they were still captives to their own thoughts and ambitions and idols. Many times it's recorded that they complained and they told Moses, it'd be better if we were back there. Do you hear those words? It'd be better if we were back in captivity in Egypt. But then they'd complain if God didn't provide the way that they wanted him to. Christian, let me just say this really bluntly. I think we have a lot of Christians wandering in a wilderness. I'm not saying you're not saved. I'm not saying that person doesn't believe in Jesus Christ fully with their heart and that they've been set free from captivity. But God brings us. The base of Mount Sinai is what they knew. One of the songs we said brings us to the foot of the cross and says, now that I have set you free, I need to be everything to you. I need to be the sole, only affection of your heart. You need to be absolutely convinced that wherever I send you and what I ask you to do, I will provide for you. Will you trust me? Now, it doesn't mean we're not human. It doesn't mean we don't have fears and doubts. It doesn't mean that we can't make mistakes. It doesn't even mean that we can't fall to temptation and sin. But there has to be a point when we say, God, you can lead me into, I'm going to call it the promised land, where you're living in the full provision of what he has for you and me. I think there is a lot of the heart of God and his kingdom that is stunted by Christians who are free but are still living in the wilderness. And he wants so much more. And he uses beautiful language. He says, open your mouth wide and I'll fill it. He uses the most physical, visceral picture we as humans know. The moment a baby is born and is in this world, it doesn't take very long before it triggers, I'm hungry. I need something to fill me up. And we all know that. And we all experience that. And he says, that's what I'll be to you. the water, the food that you need. And his heart comes through in verse 11. Strong, but broken. But my people did not listen to my voice. Israel would not submit to me. And I think verse 12 are some of the scariest words you could read. So I gave them over to their stubborn hearts to follow their own counsels. Let me read that again, friends. I gave them over to their stubborn hearts to follow their own counsels. So I ask, what idols do we have? What things have we allowed to raise up as a culture, as a society, as Christians? That we take strength, we take shelter in our own counsel, in our own stubbornness. God says, I'm not going to fight with you, but I've got so much more for you. If you stomp your foot down and you hold out against me, I will let you go that way. But it's not good. It doesn't end well. It leaves you hungry and thirsty and broken. Oh, that my people would listen to me, that Israel would walk in my ways. I'd soon subdue your enemies, turn my hands against your foes. Those who hate the Lord would cringe toward him, and their fate would last forever. But he would feed you with the finest of wheat, with the honey from the rock. I would satisfy you. What is the root of idolatry? Something gets our attention, and eventually our attention becomes an affection, and we think that thing gives us something that we want or need that God's holding out on. It's what idolatry is. Maybe it's success and power. Maybe it's a position. Maybe it's striving for wealth or comfort or pleasure. Maybe it's striving for an absolute freedom where no one else invades my life and my space, and maybe I don't need to be up front and loud and powerful. I just want to be quiet and left alone and be a little God in my own kingdom. Whatever extreme it is, it gets our attention. It becomes an affection that that's what I want. And in so doing, it diminishes God. It elevates self through whatever that is. I think one of the things that we have tried to insulate ourselves with as Christians is that only happens out there in the world. That happens to them. Because we're saved, we have God's grace. God says, oh, my people, would you listen to me? Would you cry out to me, and I would satisfy you? I want you to stand. And I have no idea, through a psalm from the Old Testament, what the Spirit is talking to you about. In modern language, we call it holiness. We say that God as a holy God is still in the business of raising up and making holy people. Holiness doesn't mean that you're externally perfect. Doesn't mean that you don't have struggles. Doesn't mean that we're immune to temptation. But it means that you don't want to wander in the wilderness of doubt, and that you fully believe God and God alone is all you need and has all you need, and you are willing to go wherever he wants you to go and be who he wants you to be. As scary as that it might be some days, he doesn't lay the whole roadmap out in front of us. Because if he did, that would scare us. He says, do you trust me? I'm the only God. Don't let anything else take my place. Don't go out carrying my name, but not in my power and my strength, with your heart divided, with affections elsewhere. And I will be sufficient. I will satisfy you. Lord, this is your heart. God, I know in reading and studying, you were working on me. I had to ask the question, what are idols in my life? I have to confess that there are things that distract me and get my attention and even times my affection. Lord, there's things that I allow to raise up that I think are pretty good, and in so doing, take my eyes off of you. Lord, I suspect that's true for some here as well. Lord, would you just lead us in a moment of confession? Wherever you're at, as the Spirit's leading you, if he brings something to mind, it's not from a spirit of condemnation. It's out of a heart of transformation, wanting you to truly be free. Maybe you've walked with the Lord for a long time. You have faith, but in so many ways you've still been wandering in the wilderness. Been set free from Egypt. You're not a slave to the world, but you haven't fully let God be the Lord, the King on the throne of your life. So God, you alone are worthy. You are God before the world was made, as we sang this morning. It's you and you alone. Lord, we're humbled by the fact that not only would you call us and provide for us, but then you ask us to be a part of your kingdom work and ministry. And Lord, as a people, as a church, as we go out, may we not take your name in vain. May we go forth in the power of the Holy Spirit because we have lives that are surrendered and come under your mission, your heart, that we are submissive to you. And in so doing, Lord, we cling to the promise that you will satisfy, that you will fill our hearts, our minds, our souls, our emotions with you, that you're enough, that there's nothing this world can offer that would satisfy like you do. So, Lord, I just pray that you've done your work, that each heart and mind has responded obediently. And in so doing, Lord, that you would get all glory and praise and honor. May it be so. Amen. Amen. Go in love, go in peace. Enjoy your fellowship.